The adventure of getting there is just as much fun as actually finding these oddball things.
A friend of mine defined it as moving meditation.
Anything that I can do personally to help improve motorcycle safety is important to me.
When I go for a ride, I plan to come home.
Welcome to Beyond Bosch. I'm Jessica Dahl. Today we are talking all about motorcycles and motorcycle safety. And as with any episode, the views expressed in this episode are those of the speaker and not necessarily Bosch. We have two guests with us today, Brad Heiler and Justin Magri. Brad has been an avid motorcycle rider for over 30 years. He's ridden in well over half of the states in the U.S. He is an electrical engineer and currently a manager in sales and project management in the two-wheeler and power sports division at Bosch. And Justin, he's a passionate engineer in the motorcycle industry. He's currently the technical project manager for two-wheel and power sports at Bosch. And Justin has been riding motorcycles since he was 3.5 years old and followed his passion to help improve the safety of motorcycling for fellow riders and families. Welcome, Brad and Justin. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us, Justin.
Thanks, Jessica.
Absolutely. So why did you guys get into motorcycles? I mean, Justin, you've been riding since you were 3.5. How did someone buy you your first bike? I mean, at 3.5, were you riding with a parent or a friend or?
In my family, you just rode motorcycles. So my entire family rides motorcycles. My mom, my dad, everyone rides motorcycles. And it's sort of all stemmed from my dad originally. He taught my mom and all of her sisters how to ride. And he had this little motorcycle he had bought in the 70s called a Indian Mini. And I still have it. I have it in my basement now. And we had this little bike that we could fit on and it was a little automatic. And so I learned to ride on that when I was, I think, about 3.5. That's at least what the pictures tell me. I don't remember learning to ride. My little brother, we taught how to ride a motorcycle before we taught him how to ride a bicycle. And then when we actually went backwards to teach him how to ride a bicycle, he thought it was kind of dumb that you had to pedal. So
I can imagine. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. What about you, Brad? How did you get into it?
I really didn't get into riding too much until high school, I guess. Late high school and college. My dad had a Harley back in the day when he was young and sold it when he went into the Air Force. And in the 70s, he picked up a used Honda CB 350. It was the standard every man's bike. And that's kind of the first introductions that I had to motorcycles. Mom was not a big fan. So that bike ended up just kind of sitting in the garage in the shed. It'd get covered with stuff. And I pulled it out when I was a teenager and got it running. And I rode it all through college. And I ended up giving it back to him after I graduated. And he moved houses and he said, hey, this has got to go one way or another. So I picked it up, dusted it off, and my son and I actually rebuilt the carbs. It's all original parts, so it still looks like an old bike. I haven't repainted it or anything, but it's a super fun project. It still rides like a 70s Honda. Yeah, it's really great. So that's kind of where my motorcycling comes from.
That's cool. So does anyone else in your family ride now?
Everyone. Yeah. So my wife, my two kids, everyone's got their endorsements, taking the training classes. The kids are still in college, so they're mostly borrowing mom and dad's bikes. But yeah, everyone rides.
Nice. What about you, Justin, and your family? Still riding?
Yeah, everyone in my family still rides. My mom typically rides more with my dad on the same bike. My older brother, he was looking to get a Ducati Scrambler that has our ABS and traction control system on it. And then my little brother is also riding dirt bikes and anything with two wheels.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then I've got a PW50 for my little girls. And it's purple and white. It's an old 94 PW50. So they're sitting on it, but I think the 2.5-year-old will be on it maybe this summer. She's ready to roll, I think.
Is she like a mini you? That's about the age you got on a bike.
Yeah, I mean, she's just being the second child. I think that first children are a little bit more reserved from what
Yeah.
I've seen, at least with my brothers and I. I have two brothers, one older, one younger. My older brother never had any accidents. I had a few, and my younger brother, we would get him to do stuff that we were afraid to do. So,
Oh my gosh. Yep. Sounds about right. I'm one of 7, so I'm the second to youngest, so I definitely did a lot more. Never on a bike, but a lot more risk taking for sure.
right.
That's awesome. So how did you guys end up working at Bosch in this field? You're obviously passionate about motorcycles. You went the engineering route. Did you always want to end up working with motorcycles, or what was your goal with that?
Yeah, so I kind of fell into the whole mobility industry after college. One of my professors had some connections with GM's electronics division, and I ended up taking a job in manufacturing. And somehow, within the first few, 3 to 5 years of working there, I found myself working on power sports vehicles, marine, industrial stuff, motorcycles, all the oddball projects that started to really develop in the auto industry. And I left there for a couple of years and ended up coming over to Bosch. And I found myself again working on motorcycles, 3-wheel vehicles, all the power sports stuff again. I just really enjoy it. It's fun. The customers are different. The passion of that industry really shows through amongst everybody that finds themselves working in it. Justin, I don't know if you've had the same experience, but I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. The customers that I work with now, it's just different. To answer your original question, I came to Bosch a couple years out of college. I had interned. I went to a co-op university, Kettering University, and I interned with Chrysler in a manufacturing plant. So when I graduated from college, I was offered a full-time position there. I actually called a friend of mine at Bosch, and I said, "Hey, do you have any jobs at Bosch?" And he said, "Try back in a couple years." I like the philosophy and the way that Bosch was structured from a company standpoint. We don't have any shareholders, and we donate a lot of our profits to charity every year. And I really liked that about the company. I knew it was a good company to work for. And so I came over to Bosch, and I didn't actually know that there was, at the time, I believe it was called the Small Engine Group, where they worked on motorcycles and all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, oh, how do I get into there? And so I started bugging our regional president and said, hey, I see you have this job. Can you hire me for that? And so 3 years ago, I finally got into the motorcycle group because I had been sort of persistent, maybe. That's
great. And you're happy you did it. You ended up in a good spot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much about following my passion for motorcycling. As a kid, I always said that I wanted to be a motorcycle police officer, because you got paid to ride motorcycles.
Right.
And then I went into engineering, and now I get paid to ride motorcycles. Yeah, I always said it would be cool to be a motorcycle police officer.
Actually, you could just wear this headset on your motorcycle and maybe like a CHIPS uniform or something, and you can live out your dream,
Yeah.
I still love watching some of those old Chip scenes, just the two guys riding, living life on the police force. That was a great show.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Well, and it seems, it comes through just talking to you guys, and really anyone that I talk to is truly passionate about what they do. I think it comes from the culture too. I've heard the power sports, the 2-wheeler area at Bosch even, and probably other places, but like the culture there is different. They're all riders and they come into work on their bikes, but is that the truth? Like, what's the culture like compared to other corporate jobs?
Yeah, I think I've been riding for 30 years, and maybe not everyone's been riding as long as Justin and I have been, but we've actually grown new riders within the group too. I remember Justin bringing in, what was it?
It's a 1943 BSA M20.
Yeah, that was one of the most awkward bikes anyone has ever let me ride. The controls are all in the wrong spots, and it's temperamental, and it was just super fun, and that shows up at work one day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely a work hard, play hard mentality. But I was, to Brad's point, I brought that motorcycle in, and you can just have these natural interactions. People come out to the parking lot, or you can pull it into the shop, and we just kind of have a camaraderie around bikes we're working on and bikes that we personally own. That bike is actually my dad's. I usually steal it from him once a year and fix a little bit on it and then leave all the dust on it. It's a military bike from World War II. It's still in drab green paint, and the shift pattern is backwards of conventional bikes. So it's just sort of weird to ride. And yeah, Brad experienced that. It's definitely strange.
Yeah, when he starts telling me, okay, this is how you have to ride this bike, and it's super fun though.
That's so cool. Well, this gives you such a good variety, too, of perspective as you're working on bikes today, riding all sorts of different bikes.
Yeah, and that's another nice thing at Bosch. Sometimes, when you're in a riding club, it may be for a specific brand of bikes, or, you do specific, things with that club. But in the work environment, and everybody, they have their own style. There's all different brands of bikes, because I don't think any of us are ever satisfied with the bikes we own. We need more or different or something.
I've heard that, like tattoos and guitars, right?
It's exactly like that. Yeah.
My dad asked me yesterday, if you were going to buy a new bike, what would you get? And I said, there's a big list.
Yeah. What am I going to do with it?
Exactly. Right.
Well, what
That's
is
exactly
your
what I
top
said.
dream? Doesn't matter money or what you're going to, what would be the one, the ultimate bike?
There's just so many different ways to motorcycle. Like I went to a training recently. It was a Bosch training for some programs we're working on, Rawhide Adventures, and we were riding BMW GS 1250s, adventure riding, really heavy bikes. And I've done a lot of dual sport riding in the past, but I had never ridden really heavy adventure bikes in that setting before. And then I realized how capable those motorcycles are. And there's just so many different types of motorcycles that you kind of have a dream garage, that's filled with. It's not just one, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There's a list.
That's hilarious. You both can't answer it. You're like, no, it's always at least a dozen,
Yeah. In recent years, you're talking about the adventure bikes, the BMW GS, the Ducati Multistrada V4 that just came out. These are kind of the Swiss Army knife of motorcycles, and those are actually getting better and better at doing many different things. I'm more of a road rider, and the features on some of these bikes, adaptive cruise control, blind spot detection, these are great for road riders. But they're extremely capable off-road as well, and with just some tire changes and different settings, and away you go, and it's fantastic. So somebody who does, hey, I only want the one bike, I don't have space in the garage, those things are available, and the rest of us who are willing to throw other stuff out of the garage to make room for a second or third or seventh motorcycle, whatever it is, yeah, those options are there too.
That's awesome. So as we're talking about, one of you were saying, I think it was you, Brad, your mom or your wife was not as into the motorcycle. And I kind of want to get to the safety topic of bikes are fun and adventurous. And we talked a bit about taking risks, but obviously there's a huge safety component. And that's where you guys really operate, in the space of making the bike safe, but without compromising the fun, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've worked in the safety realm my whole career at Bosch. I have a deep sense of worth by working on these safety products, let's say, because I feel not only am I helping myself as a rider, but I'm helping everybody in the industry that maybe doesn't even realize the impact that it's having. It's a two-wheel vehicle, which is inherently unstable to some extent. It's no secret. So anything that I can do personally to help improve motorcycle safety is important to me. And it's one of the reasons I've stayed in this position, and one of the reasons every bike my family will ever purchase will have analog brakes and stability control and safety features that help support them as riders.
What do you guys say to someone who says, I don't want that on my bike, it's going to mess with my ride? What do you say to that?
I, as an evaluator for the products that we deliver, I don't accept anything that I believe is intrusive or doesn't add value to the customer. So we oftentimes are riding in scenarios that are adverse, doing really aggressive maneuvers, and I'm not comfortable providing something to an end user that I wouldn't want to ride myself. And that's really important to me, that that the system feels natural, and that the only time the system comes in is when you've really gone past the limits of physics, or you're approaching the limits of physics. And it's still unfortunately possible to find those limits in certain scenarios, but we've definitely improved the safety of motorcycling. So that's really important for me. As I mentioned earlier, my entire family motorcycles. And when my older brother called me last year and said, I want to buy a new bike, what should I get? I said, well, the bike you're looking at doesn't have cornering brake control. I want you to have cornering brake control. I want you to have cornering traction control. And he went and found a different bike, and he said he likes it more. He probably will never find those features because he's not riding at the limit that some of us are, but he lives in Colorado. So it's very possible that he might be coming down some mountain pass and there's gravel across the road, and, something runs out in front of him and he needs that feature. And it's just sitting there in the background, and it doesn't come in until he really needs it. So that's really important for me. Some of the newest technology that we're working on, like adaptive rider assistance systems with adaptive cruise control and forward collision warning. I have had a friend that is no longer with us. He could have really used forward collision warning. So that's important to me. The stuff we're doing is important to me.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think any rider who has ridden for any period of time knows somebody like Justin just mentioned, somebody who could have used a safety system and had a bad outcome. And that's I agree. It's really important. And you mentioned, what do you say to the people who say I don't need that? I'm a good rider. It's really educating those people as to what the systems do and what they don't do. Because it's typically it's not that the person believes that it's a bad system necessarily, but it's that they don't understand what it does. And that, I've spent a lot of time in the last 5 years or so on education activities. Just personally, I've volunteered with some of the robotics programs in the community, in the schools, and I'll take these things and explain them to new young drivers and riders. So that a lot of these technologies go back and forth between automotive and motorcycles. So to get them to understand what the technologies do, get them interested in it, get them interested in STEM as well, and all of these things is really important to me to try and get the word out. And Bosch has also been good about allowing me to go and talk to rider trainers, giving them the information of what the systems do and don't do. They can develop the curriculums accordingly to help them get the word out.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, also the thing to think about is it's not necessarily the rider on a motorcycle, right? It's the other people around. I mean, myself included. Sometimes a bike will just appear, and I'm a pretty safe driver. I'm looking in my blind spots constantly. I'm paranoid. I don't want to hit anybody, of course. But yeah, I mean, there's times where I feel like a bike comes out of nowhere. So I can imagine it's not about necessarily how great of a rider you are or how much experience you have. There's other people around you or people are on their phones these days, right? So that's a huge element, I'm sure.
Yeah, as motorcyclists, we know that we're almost invisible. I understand that for the fellow car operators out there. And I've almost had it happen to me. I'm a rider and I've almost missed motorcycles. At the last minute, I see a motorcycle. But we are out there, we exist, just look twice, as the signs say. And if something happens and everyone is still okay, if you just give a wave to a motorcyclist and an apologetic look on your face, I see that. And when people do that, when I get cut off by a car and I just look over and the person, you can clearly see that the person really didn't mean to do that and they really feel bad about it and they wave to you, you just wave back and you say, it's okay, it happens. There's definitely room for forgiveness there.
We have to share the road. So let's acknowledge each other. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Can you talk a little bit more about Bosch's history in the safety space and how far we've come and a little bit to where we're going?
Yeah. Bosch has been working on motorcycle safety systems since the late 1980s. Granted, it was a very large automotive-based system, nothing like the systems that are there today, but Bosch has been a big proponent of safety for everyone on the road. So this has been a very long, thoughtful process to get to where we are today. We launched the first motorcycle-specific systems about 10 years ago. And these are modules that are built and designed specifically for two-wheelers. Technology's gotten to the point where we can make things smaller. We can make them more transparent to the rider, where the system just reacts and feels natural. And it's been really, I think, eye-opening for a lot of people. They have in their head of, you talked about the rider who says, I don't need that system. A lot of times that's based on an experience of a very early ABS system that was kind of rough, to be honest. And, the system and the technology at the time did everything it could to make a safer bike. But the feeling of it, there was a lot more feedback to the rider, and maybe they just didn't like it. And they felt it changed their experience in some way. And the systems today, they don't have that. They're more in the background and really there to just support the rider in those emergency type situations.
As you guys know, the Bosch slogan is invented for life. And I think that we in the motorcycle group and across all of Bosch really take that to heart. So some of the background on ABS systems within Bosch. Bosch co-developed the first automotive electronic four-wheel ABS system with Mercedes on the S-Class for the 1978 model. That was an option in 1978. And then in 1988, BMW released the first motorcycle ABS. But to Brad's point, by the early 90s, we were working on motorcycle ABS. And for a long time, those sort of ran in parallel using automotive technology in motorcycles. And then, as Brad mentioned, there's kind of been a divergence where you can correct a yaw on a car with the other two wheels that you have. And motorcycles, in the last 10 years, using an inertial measurement unit, or IMU, we're able to measure 6 axes of acceleration on the vehicle: X, Y, Z, pitch, yaw, and roll. And the roll is very important to us because as we lean through a curve, our contact patch with the road becomes smaller. And typically, this is where all of the bad instances on motorcycles happen. For single vehicle accidents, this is where problems occur for motorcyclists. So you come through a turn, and the inside of that turn, unbeknownst to you, there's spilled diesel fuel or gravel or sand, and the amount of traction you have there changes. So that's where that technology has sort of branched off, and we are completely on our own now in motorcycle ABS and motorcycle stability control, using things that we've learned in other areas of Bosch, like our inertial measurement unit, but integrating those into motorcycle ABS and traction control, which comprises our motorcycle stability control, as we call it.
Oh, that's awesome. So now it's even more specific to two-wheel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the same is true for the adaptive rider assistance systems. When we've mounted a radar module to a motorcycle, that's all fine and dandy driving in a straight line. But then as you start to go through a turn, the radar is looking in one spot and the motorcycle is traveling another direction. So we have to adapt for all of those things. With anytime we lean the vehicle over, the dynamics change. So it's the entire reason to ride a motorcycle.
So you all had a really exciting and fun project a couple years ago with Arch Motorcycles. Can you tell a little bit more about that? Like, who is Arch? What is it? How that kind of came about?
Sure. The introduction to Arch was, I tend to find myself in situations that just happen. They happened to have a booth at the EICMA motorcycle show in Italy. It's the largest motorcycle show in the world. And one year they showed up and they were introducing some of the new bikes they were working on. And on a placard next to one of their bikes, they talked about ABS. And I said, well, we can help you with that. We had this conversation in Italy. Then we started pulling in more of the technical team and having those conversations of, okay, how does it fit into your motorcycles? That's where Justin and the rest of the team really shined. Having riders come to a company like Arch and really work with them to make something special. I remember talking with Gard Hollinger and Keanu Reeves, the co-owners of Arch Motorcycles, and they just plain asked, "Why do you guys want to do this with us? You know, we're a small boutique company, and Bosch is a conglomerate." And basically, the answer was, "Well, we like to make cool motorcycles, and this is cool. Yeah, we want to find a way to help you, and you need to have safety systems." And I don't think they could have been happier with that answer, to be honest, and neither could I. There's so many reasons that project could have gotten shot down and said, we don't have time, we don't have people, they're not a big enough company, whatever the case is. But in the end, our role is to create these safety systems. Somebody's going to ride Arch motorcycles, and we want them to be safe and have a great experience.
That's awesome. That just speaks to the values we have as a company, and you guys working for that division. It's obvious it's a passion, and it's true to who you are and what you do, and that just comes through. I think that's really awesome. So I wanted to ask also, have you ever had just one or two like really crazy scenarios with a motorcycle, or maybe like the best trip of your life? You know, one of those. Could you share something like that?
Yeah, I've got a long list. You know, I've had so many experiences on motorcycles, but a couple that jump out to me. My friends and I got a little eager one year, and my friend had bought a cabin up in St. Helen area, and he said, let's do our first ride. And it was early April. And we said, yeah, the snow's melted. It should be fine. And the snow was melted in the areas that weren't shaded. And the areas that were shaded, which is on the other side of every turn, was like Zamboni gloss ice. And we call it's now known as the ice ride. There were 9 of us. I think there were like 15 crashes in like a couple hour time period. And lo and behold, one of the guys that was on that ride, I was told, yeah, we're hiring a new engineer in our group. And this is his name. And I said, hey, I know that guy. I rode with that guy on the ice ride. And I had never seen him since. He had come up, friend of a friend, and we kind of circled back together. And now he works in the motorcycle group at Bosch. But his dad was on that ride, and he actually got turned around backwards and passed me going backwards on a motorcycle on the ice.
What?
And I mean, he ultimately found the ground. But everybody was okay. It was just kind of it was an interesting situation. So my recommendation is make sure that the ice is melted before you get out there and go too fast. Another trip that I had, my friend and I decided we wanted to go on a long road trip. I was riding a sport bike. I still have a Buell 1125 CR. Not really a long distance bike, but we put about 4,500 miles on in 6 days. And he had a sister that lived at the time in Key West. So if we could make it to Key West, it was free room and board. And so we rode down the entire Blue Ridge Parkway in 1 day. And then we rode from Cherokee, North Carolina to Key West, which was 1,050 miles in 18 hours.
Wow.
And that was on a sport bike with no cruise control. And that was the only day that I disliked a motorcycle. I took a break the next day. I was kind of like, I'm good.
I hope you got your iron butt patch for that one.
That was the goal. The goal was, one of the contests. There are different levels of iron butt. One of them is over 1,000 miles in 24 hours. So that was the goal, and we did it. But it was not exactly pleasurable. If I had to do it again, I'd do it on a large adventure bike or a cruiser.
Sure. Nice. Iron butt. And we got ice ride, iron butt. What else?
Yeah. My position at Bosch has also just afforded me the possibility to do really amazing projects with great customers. And a couple years ago, we had a customer who wanted to accumulate a lot of use with our system on a group of their motorcycles. So they said, we're going to rent a racetrack. We'd like you to come out and ride with us for 2 days. Okay, twist my arm, I'll come. So we went out there, and I met a gentleman from Spain. His name is Juan Borja. He raced in GP racing from 1992 to 1999, and I got to ride for 2 days with him out on a track. And once I even felt like I was going to pass him, but then I realized that I had better tires than him. He was on a different bike with not as good of tires, and I was like, I'm catching Juan Borja, and I wasn't. It was just different.
It was the tires.
It was the tires, yeah. Yep, absolutely.
That's awesome. Have any of you ever done a big, I know you just mentioned the Florida trip or a cross-country thing, or, I've heard a lot with the motorcycle community that it's so unique. It's not like traveling with a car. You stop in places that you don't normally stop if you're on a typical road trip, or you pull up to a cafe that's on the side of a mountain or something like that. Is that kind of the common theme and gives you that accessibility?
That's my favorite vacations that I've ever taken, to be honest. I mean, Disney World with the kids is right up there. But before kids, my wife and I would pick a direction every year, and we'd take 10 days and we'd go riding. And one year we say, okay, we're going to head west, and we'd have, okay, we want to see Mount Rushmore is maybe the one goal we have. So we head towards Mount Rushmore, and along the way, we're taking constant side trips and detours, and there's a sign for the Corn Palace. Let's go see what that's about. We grew up in corn country. I was, farm country, Illinois. So we go and we see this old state fair or whatever it is, building with corn glued all on the outside of it. And, it's fun. It's amazing. All these little things around the country that you can just experience. And if you take the time on a motorcycle, the adventure of getting there is just as much fun as actually finding these oddball things. And I've ridden to the coast of Maine and go up through Canada and back down through the U.S. and over in the Carolinas. There's all kinds of roads. The Tail of the Dragon is probably one of the most famous ones for motorcyclists. Is kind of everyone has to go ride at once kind of thing. But there's fantastic roads everywhere if you just look for them.
I've always said that the purpose of a car is to get where you're going, and the purpose of a motorcycle is to get lost. And so for me, motorcycling, I just realized a couple years ago how to define this because it was hard for me to explain to people. A friend of mine defined it as moving meditation. And I finally realized that that's what it is for me. When I ride, I can clear my mind of everything else that's going on. And I honestly forget about all of the other junk that's weighing me down. And so when I'm out riding, The purpose is really just to put miles behind you and go see things. I used to do a lot of dual sporting, and I'm going to get back into dual sporting probably this year. And what I would do is just leave, when I was still in high school, I would leave my parents' house and I would play a game called rights and lefts. And all you did was drove in a general direction, making rights and lefts in the correct order. Of course, if you make 3 rights in a row, it doesn't get you anywhere. And if you make 3 lefts in a row, it doesn't get you anywhere. But my goal was always to try and make it as far as I could without touching asphalt, because dual sporting is all about being off-road, or if you have to go onto the asphalt, you can. And so I've ridden pretty long distances across Michigan and all other areas just trying to avoid asphalt. And if I come to an asphalt road, I'll turn around and I'll go back a mile to try and go another way. It's kind of just about the adventure. And if the sun is in the right spot, you know the direction you're going.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes, those cloudy days that my wife would yell at me and say, you're going east when you think you're going west, right?
You're like, well, I'm on the bike.
Whatever.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, you guys, I want to wrap us up here. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about that you want to make sure we touch on?
I guess I'd like to, motorcycle season is coming. I would like to encourage people who ride to go out, practice your skills. I've been riding for 30 years, and the first thing I do every year is I go to a parking lot. I make sure my bike runs well, tires have air in them, the lights work, T-clocks, go through your checks and make sure your machine is in good shape to go riding. And then I go make sure I'm in good shape to go riding. Because I haven't ridden in months. Consistently. Maybe I've traveled and was able to ride for work somewhere where there's no snow, but go out, practice braking. Try your ABS system if you have it. Step on the rear brake and feel what it does in a straight line, and do these things safely. And I do that with my family every year. I guess that's what I would encourage people to do. As you're looking for that next bike, educate yourself on some of these systems. Go test them. Ask questions. Justin and I love to answer a lot of questions about this stuff. It's fun. It's what we do. So I tend to go to dealerships and I see somebody looking at a bike and they're asking questions. And if I can participate in that conversation, I'll find my way in and just learn about what other people are doing.
In addition, I would add, buy good gear, because we all know that there is inherent risk with motorcycling. If you're a motorcyclist, you understand that there's risk there. I understand and weigh that risk. When I met my wife, I told her I ride motorcycles, and we were dating. If you don't like that, you probably shouldn't be with me, because I'm not. My mom tried to convince my dad to stop riding motorcycles when we were born, and he stopped riding on the road for a year or two and then just started again, because it's ingrained in us. But I make sure that I have the best gear that I can afford, and I make sure that it fits properly. The thing that I always tell people that say, well, that helmet would be really expensive. Your head is very expensive too. I went to a pretty good university, and according to them, my head is worth a lot of money. So the investment to buy a $600 or $800 helmet to protect what's in my head is pretty important. I'm already losing, due to old age, what's in my head. So I need to try and retain as much as possible. The other thing is, a lot of people spend a lot of money to make their motorcycles faster or to look different. I would encourage people that ride to investigate spending some of that money on rider training. There's a lot of really good rider training when you get your endorsement, but you can go so much further than that with programs like Yamaha Championship Riding School, YCRS for short. Those guys, they're a team of race riders, and they know the dynamics of a motorcycle. And I've become a much better rider by taking the things that you learn in some of these advanced classes and really applying them on the road. And I don't do that to try and increase my speed. I do it to increase my safety. And so I can now go the same speed and be safer. which is important for me. I've got, as I mentioned, 2 little kids. So when I go for a ride, I plan to come home. And it's really important to me that if a deer runs out in front of me in the middle of a turn, I know what to do and that I have the safety margin necessary to execute the maneuver I need to execute. The last thing I'll say is that I watch a lot of motorcycle reviews on YouTube, and I watch what people are doing with our products. And I see a lot of people saying, I'm going to shut the ABS off, or I'm going to shut the traction control system off. And unless you're on a racetrack and you are a very high level rider, I don't think that there's a need to do that. As I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't release for production something that I'm not comfortable with owning on my own personal bike. And I very rarely get into a situation where I say the system is intervening in a moment that it shouldn't be. Almost always the system is intervening because I have pushed the threshold so far that the system is saying you really should kind of tone it down a little bit.
Take it down. Take it down.
Getting a little excited. But the other thing is that no matter what your skill level is, I've seen some of our customer test riders are high level racers. And at our vehicle proving ground, we have a surface which simulates hard packed snow. It would also simulate sort of like a diesel spill on the road. And we do something called transitions, where we transition from a high mu surface like asphalt onto this low mu surface. And you're doing that at 40 miles an hour without riggers on in case something happens, which it often does. Because if you attempt that transition without ABS, it is unrecoverable. I haven't seen anyone that can do a transition in limit braking across that surface. And we had a gentleman say, I want to try it. And we said, keep your feet up because you will hit the outriggers. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So even past the skill level, you never know what's through that next turn. And so having that system there, it means that you don't crash your bike and you don't have to buy new parts or you don't get hurt. You just feel a little feedback in the brake lever and realize that the ABS system worked and just be thankful and
go on to ride again, right?
Right. That's the big thing is I've talked to people time and time again who the reason they don't ride anymore is because they had a bad instance with a motorcycle when they were younger. They rode once and they crashed it, or they rode a couple times and they had a crash. And we're talking people that had crashes in the 70s and 80s without any of the safety systems that we have now available to us. And they won't get on a motorcycle again because of that bad scenario or situation that happened to them. And I don't want people to go down that path where they own a motorcycle and they enjoy motorcycling and then they have a bad accident and they either can't ride again or they won't ride again. I want to see more motorcycles on the road, not less. And it would also help with all that traffic congestion. So if you're a car driver and you don't want to ride a motorcycle, just encourage everyone else to, because there'll be less cars on the road.
Perfect. I wanted to also ask you guys one last thing I like to ask everybody, just for your best piece of advice, either something that you've ever gotten that has kind of stuck with you that maybe just quickly comes to mind. It doesn't have to be professional, can be, or something that you want to offer to the audience.
So I have a friend that helped get me into Bosch, and he told me, marry a woman from a good family. And I did that, and I think that my life has been considerably better because of that. So that's my non-motorcycling piece of advice.
And that just secured you another bike, probably. Your wife's like, fine. Yeah. All right, I just heard that on the podcast.
All right, I need to prepare better for these types of questions because I think I just cost myself another bike.
Brad, you can tell your wife you said the same thing.
Exactly what Justin just said, yeah. She actually is the person who pulled out the checkbook when I was shopping for my last bike. She got tired of my window shopping and said, no, this is the one you're buying.
That's awesome.
So, yes, she's my favorite person in the world and my adventure partner. If I look back at, say, other advice that I've gotten over the years, I think it's that, people in general want to do the right things. Nobody inherently is trying to to do the wrong things. So if I relate this to motorcycling, the people who say, "Oh, I don't need safety systems," or "Oh, I had to lay it down," you're basically saying, "Oh, I had to crash." No, I'd prefer not to. Thank you. And but it's not that they inherently have some negative feelings towards what we do or motorcycles that have this stuff. They just don't understand it. And that goes across all kinds of different situations. People really want to do the right thing, and if they have the right information, they'll do the right thing for them and for others. So I try to work and live in those kind of directions.
I like that. That's good. Well, thank you guys for spending the time and sharing so much about motorcycle safety and also just your personal stories. It was really fun. The views expressed in this episode are those of the speaker and not necessarily Bosch.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Bosch podcast. In case you missed our other episodes, now's your chance. Go back and take a listen.